social media. Um, we are going to take about 35 minutes to go through the content. Do feel free to interrupt using the chat window in the bottom right-hand corner. But at the end, I'll also make sure that there's a bit of an opportunity for me to answer any questions that you might have, or for you to ask me how you might want to kind of apply some of the things that we're talking about in the context of your own organization. Would somebody mind just putting in the bottom right-hand corner chat to say that you can definitely hear me? Because I've got 10 minutes in before, and then somebody said, oh, we can't hear you. So perfect. Thank you very much for confirming that you can hear me. So for those of you that don't know who I am or who we are, my name is James Digby. I'm the Managing Director of Bright. We help the education sector as a whole to attract parents, pupils, but also customers and also staff to their businesses and organizations. So some of our clients, they sell into the education sector. Some of them are schools, some of them are independent schools, some are examples, a variety of different things. But the thing in that they have in common is kind of a dedication and a drive towards helping people learn and improve. So from the 5,000 plus campaigns we run a year for the education sector, we're able to improve click-through rates. We know last year it was about 100% improvement for a number of our clients, and that kind of led to about a 40% improvement on return on investment. So giving that kind of a little bit of a background to what we're going to be talking to you about today, which is how to make the most of social media to market your organization or school out to your target audience. We're going to go through understanding the current social media landscape. We're going to talk a little bit about how do you actually develop engaging content. It can be very overwhelming if you don't have time to kind of sit down and kind of work out what to be doing as an approach. We'll talk a little bit about the different kind of content types and how they change in terms of their effectiveness. And then finally, a really important bit is measuring that engagement and that reach piece so that you know whether you're achieving the goals that you want to achieve. We will be sharing a recording to everybody that's registered. So if you do need to drop off midway through, or you're needed for something else, you won't miss out. We do have the ability for you to ask questions as we go along, but also to book in a free consultation. So if you are not sure how some of the things we're going to talk about today applies to you, let me know and I'll book something in. And we also have a number of different resources, including a useful social media calendar on our website. So feel free to download those as they are free. So let's start off by actually understanding the current social media landscape. If we look at 2024, you can see from this diagram that the most popular platform at the moment is Facebook, followed by YouTube, and then further down, but kind of growing in terms of size and engagement, you have Instagram and TikTok. I think what's really important kind of note here is that there's different levels of engagement. So it's not a case of your money's always best spent on Facebook, but it does give you an idea of the reach that you're going to get when you're kind of picking up a platform. We have seen a real increase in engagement levels for video shorts. So the fact that you can get those on a lot of the top platforms here might be kind of linked in terms of their size and their growth rates, but it is kind of worth considering that as we kind of go through this. And we're going to touch on TikTok, for example, when we get further through the presentation. So we're seeing growth, rapid growth in kind of those areas in terms of video shorts, but Facebook is still doing the best out of the different social media platforms. So what kind of trends are we seeing at the moment in the education sector? One that we perhaps didn't necessarily expect to see so soon, there's been an increase in terms of influencer partnerships. Typically, you would have maybe come across this in the education sector for education events where you have particular speakers that come to a number of those events, and they build up a bit of a reputation as an influencer. We're now starting to see people do that with industry experts, students and ex-students that have perhaps gone on to do something in particular, but also influential teachers that are maybe building a new method of teaching, building a new method of communicating ideas across to students and learners. So it's quite an interesting trend. It's quite an early trend. I think time's going to tell whether it works well. But maybe for those selling into schools, it's also something that to bear in mind, that building up those relationships with certain people, or maybe even setting yourself as a thought leader on something like LinkedIn, could have long-term benefits for you. So for schools, for example, those collaborations, maybe on social media platforms like LinkedIn, for example, or even as we've just looked at, Facebook, those collaborations are being used at the moment to kind of put out a particular initiative, put out a particular element of that school, maybe something that sets them apart from other people. It's that kind of trust that you need to be considering. So maybe following some of these influencers for a little bit before deciding who you're going to work with, because you want an influencer that is trusted. You want one that is open and honest, especially as you're not selling a product on Amazon, for example. You're selling education, you're selling things that are connected to children in many cases, but definitely something that people hold very dear and is very important to people. And whatever organization or business in the education sector you are, that is going to be the case. So my only word of caution here would maybe be to follow people for a little bit, see how they're interacting with different people, and see what kind of levels of trust they have. You may well be doing this yourself already, but we're definitely seeing a massive increase in user-generated content. A few years ago, I think, when people were kind of considering this, there was a lot of fear around engaging with students, for example, in generating content. But we're seeing an increase with nurseries engaging with parents and encouraging them to create content. We've seen an increase in businesses selling into the education sector, with them engaging with customers and moving beyond simple testimonials, but really kind of engaging with them about how they're using their products and services. Where you are encouraging students to share on social media, I would highly recommend some kind of guidelines for them. So potentially something that's quite visual. A one-pager would work well in terms of what should they be linking you as an organization with on social media, what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And I think longer than that. So anybody tempted to kind of have a 15-page policy document, it's worth noting that students often just ignore it. You are better off with something which is easy to digest and easy to hold people to account for. And if you have a sixth form, it's worth noting this is a really, really good approach. Typically, those students are going to be influencing the decision-making process a lot more than they would in other year groups. So consider how you want to get across that brand from a professional point of view, but also how you're going to make it authentic with that user-generated content. So those restrictions on user-generated content need to be very well balanced. They need to be making sure that what's going out is professional, but also making sure that what goes out is authentic and is genuine, because that is the name of the game at the moment. Something which is just starting to come about. It's always been there to a certain extent, but the level of detail that people are able to go into now has increased. It is personalized content and targeting. So looking to create personalized content for specific users in specific situations. This might seem incredibly overwhelming. The best process that we've kind of come up with in terms of helping our customer base for this is to help them segment their target audience into different personas. So ideally, you would have 3 or 4 because it will make life a bit easier. But some of those clients are going to have maybe even 5 or 6 personas with different interests, different situations, different economic, social differences between them, different demographics, and so on and so forth. So once you've got those personas, you can then target each of those on the platforms that they use. You can target them with the right messaging, and it can help with recruitment as well. And it can help with recruitment because we know that what attracts people to an organization differs for those different demographics, differs for people in different situations and different locations, and so on and so forth. So if that's something you'd like to talk to us about, please do email me after this and I'll book in a meeting. So, um, for most of you, you would be looking to kind of improve your brand really through social media. That's typically one of the key ways that people want to use social media to achieve their goals. Visual storytelling has become the bedrock of marketing across multiple sectors. Probably the people that are doing really, really well at the moment are those in tech and software, whether that is within education, so ed tech, or whether that's outside of the education sector. They are typically very good at visual storytelling. So do use those as examples to kind of get an idea of what works well and what doesn't work well. We do have a session on storytelling. So if you feel like you might be struggling to kind of build a story, let me know and I'll make sure to invite you for the storytelling session. Um, but it's important, and I'm going to mention this a few times today, it's really important that when you're using social media, you need to consistently apply your own brand messaging. If you don't have that, if you can't say really easily, really quickly, our USPs are X, Y, and Z, then you're going to really struggle to do that. And you're going to really struggle to do that because the messaging you send out today might be different to 3 months' time and 6 months' time and 12 months' time and so on and so forth. So, what are people doing to kind of build that brand presence online? TikTok is something that when it first became really popular, I know a number of clients started to talk to us about, and there was a little bit of fear there. It's a platform that's been banned in a number of countries. It's a platform that's been linked to dangerous habits by children. So I think just kind of being cautious around it is actually going to make sense. And I often worry that sometimes people feel that when new platforms come out, to be kind of cutting edge and to be brand new, you need to jump straight on them. I actually think for the education sector, in this instance, it was well worth kind of waiting for a little bit, well worth waiting to see what restrictions came into place, and just trying to wait for it to be a little bit of a safer platform and a bit more appropriate for their branding. So there's been a real dominance across all sectors, but in particular in the education sector, with the engagement levels for video shorts. We know that people like to be able to easily digest content. If you've tried them before, you'll know that there's a massive difference between putting a video short out there with and without subtitles. So always put some kind of captions on there so that people can read it on a train or view it at work, especially if you're doing something linked to recruitment. But schools can really leverage this as a platform by creating engaged content, maybe participating in viral challenges. But the most important element is providing that window into school life in a very open and genuine way. And that's where you start to kind of see an overlap between user generated content and maybe some of that more professional content that you might put out as an individual or a team. Um, a kind of step down in terms of risk from many people's points of view. I think Instagram perhaps feels a little bit more solid in terms of its links to Meta. It's not banned in places as much as TikTok is, but Instagram is working really well because it's got this ability to have video shorts. It's got the ability to have visual posts as well. So if you're not quite ready to try something like TikTok, and you haven't started to use Instagram, it is a good area to maybe consider, because it's got the ability to have reels, for example, and you will be able to see how do people engage with your photos, how do people engage with your videos, what's the difference between the two of them. We're going to come back to this point when we talk about data and tracking engagement and conversions, because it's really important to kind of understand. So we will come back to this. So how do you actually create this engaging content? It is surprisingly complex. We've summarized the approach that we take, and the hope that it kind of helps you to understand the thought process. But we typically start off with that audience targeting. So really get to the bottom of it, segment it as often as possible, segment it in many different ways, and you'll start to see at the point where you're really fed up with the process, you'll start to see within your target audience these personas that start to form. So you segment it one way, you segment it another way, you segment it another way. After a while, you'll start to kind of be able to group those segments together and say, okay, this demographic who's interested in this, who's using these platforms, they form one persona and they all share the similar kind of characteristics. Whereas this persona is slightly different in that it's got X, Y, and Z. It's a different demographic. It's got different needs. Once you know that, you can then start tailoring that content. If you are selling into the education sector, if you are therefore looking for customers, if you're looking for students, if you're looking for parents, whatever it might be, you're hopefully going to be segmenting your data anyway in that way. But having those personas and really understanding that target audience will allow you to be even more targeted. And therefore, you're going to start to get better engagement. Do start to kind of engage with your audience. If people comment, if people ask questions, if people tag you in anything, do engage with that content. So be aware that you're going to need to invest extra time in that part of it. And start to promote out user-generated content. We really like testimonials. We really like kind of discussions between people. A lot of people after the pandemic stopped doing virtual online sessions, which is a real shame. So if you can, maybe interview your head of sixth form, for example, do that, divide the video up into different clips and start to put it out there. Get other people involved. A number of clients that we work with, they use their sixth formers to even generate that content by setting them kind of marketing challenges or assignments that they go away and that they run for them. They can then edit and they can clean it up and tidy it, but it does save them a lot of time. Definitely use a mix of channels. Make sure that your website is going to be easy to convert. Remember, a lot of these people, when you reach them with some of these social media platforms, they're not going to be in the frame of mind to be filling in long forms or calling you or contacting you or whatever it might be. So the call to action here, when you do drive traffic from social media through to your website, it needs to be very simple for them to complete, maybe as much as first name, surname, an email address, or even a little bit bigger in terms of what they're interested in, or a free text box, but no more than that. The easier it is for somebody to fill in, the better. And then, as I've just mentioned with Instagram, the answer to success really does come from tracking and then improving your campaigns based on any data that you get back. So, for example, here's just a simple screenshot of different platforms that are driving traffic to a website. The pricing is going to, of course, be relevant, but in this situation, we can see in terms of the number of sessions that people have had from the different platforms, we can see kind of the goal completions. We can see how long those people stay on the website. So, for example, here, LinkedIn did have a high number of sessions, but they had a lower conversion rate than, say, something like Instagram. So you can use this data to really understand which platforms are best for you to use. We talk a lot about that kind of target audience build. Do not worry, kind of in those early stages, that what you kind of put together is going to be fairly simple. Like maybe it's just going to be the age, location, and socioeconomic background of those people. But if you feel that you are not kind of narrow enough in your targeting, A, we're very happy to talk it through, but B, go back to that segmentation, really try and kind of narrow it down. If you feel that it's really broad and it's just people who have an interest in the education sector, for example, you're not going to get the right results, and you're not going to be able to report on it in a way that kind of tells you where is your money best spent to get a good return on investment. This is the main way that we can improve return on investment. We've got a large data set. We know what works well for different types of people, trying to attract different people, and so on and so forth. But if you are doing it yourself, do start off by narrowing down that target audience. Start to look at what interests people have. What are your current parents? What are your current customers? What are their views on the education sector? If you're in an independent school, do they have a particular approach? Can you divide people in who perhaps are ex-alumni, alumni, or perhaps parents of other children within the school or connected to those parents? Try and divide those people up and understand a little bit about what kind of makes them tick, and try and understand some of the values of those people. Try and understand for sixth formers or for parents or for decision makers in schools, what's really important to them. Do they have a genuine desire around kind of academic achievement? Is it more about the pastoral side of things? Is it more about being well-rounded? And when you have that, it's going to make it a lot easier to build your target audience and then target that target audience with the correct messaging. So how do different people within those target audiences interact with your content? Are they liking it? Are they sharing it? Are they just clicking on it because they're scrolling through social media? Or are they sending it to other people? Are they commenting on it? And try and kind of link that back to your segmentation as well. Follow up with each of the different people that attend any events that you have or any sessions you have about your products, services, school, whatever it might be. And again, the name of the game here is to really make it feel bespoke. So if people have attended different sessions, if they've asked particular questions, make sure that you go back with bespoke messaging, either for their segmentation or for whatever kind of engagement that they've given. And then in terms of those people that maybe registered and didn't attend, consider what you could be doing to kind of convert those people into a conversation further down the line. So once you've kind of understood what you're going to do in terms of a strategy, it's important to kind of consider your content, really. So variety is the key here. So long as you are measuring engagement and reach, which we're about to talk about, variety is really an important thing to start off with. I've never seen anybody that hasn't ended up keeping a good level of variety, but initially go as varied as possible. So have blogs, videos, infographics, measure that engagement, see what's happening, see how people's habits change, see how your different target audiences do different things, but also track those goals that you've hopefully set in Google Tag Manager, for example, to make sure that these people are converting and they're not just kind of engaging with your content and then forgetting all about you. Each platform, each piece of content is going to offer different advantages. It's going to offer different journeys, and it's going to take different amounts of time to convert people. So give it a good amount of time, ideally 12 months, and then use that tracking to say, okay, on Instagram, we get a lot of traffic, but a lot of it converts. On LinkedIn, it's very expensive, but we do convert all those people. On Google, it's X, Y, and Z. Because otherwise you're going to find that the following year, you're going to be just as stuck as you might be in your first year of doing some of these things. And then diversify that content to see what works and what doesn't work, but also based on the different platforms that you're using, that help you maximize engagement, reach, and therefore kind of achieve some of those goals that you've set for social media. So my favorite bit is actually about the measuring engagement and reach element, because it's the bit that helps me the most to kind of understand what's working. And quite often something that I feel instinctively is working is generating a lot of interest, it's generating a lot of views and clicks and so on and so forth, but it doesn't convert. And each time it just reminds me that it's really, really important to kind of consider reach and engagement and the actual results that you're achieving from this effort that you're putting in. So reach is the total unique number of users that have seen your content. So measuring this is really important. You should be able to do this on any of the platforms. Again, if you need some help, do let us know. And it's really important because it's going to tell you when you're building that campaign, you can see that reach on, or that potential reach. It's going to tell you the potential size of your audience. So if you're saying we want to target people within a mile's radius that has children under a certain age, and it's coming back to you and saying there's only 100 people on the platform there, and you keep doing that at different platforms and keep saying around that figure, you're going to know that you've got a very small target audience. If you're targeting people in an urban area and you're doing 10 miles, for example, you may well be having thousands of people that meet the target audience. You may feel it's too broad. So really understanding the reach before you launch the campaign, but also as that campaign's gone on, and year on year and quarter on quarter and so on and so forth, how that changes is going to be vital to you making better informed decisions in the future. So reach is how many people it's getting to. Engagement is how those people kind of interact with that content. So are people liking it, commenting, sharing? What are they doing? Quite often I feel like that when people are liking content, is not as important as them sharing it or reposting it themselves, because quite often we know that people, when they're scrolling through social media, they're liking things just out of habit rather than chaos. Clicking through to content is a good sign in terms of engagement, but it's then what do people do once they've done that? Do they register? Do they purchase something? Do they sign up? Do they attend an event? What happens? And you're starting to see reactions becoming an element on the vast majority of posts across the vast majority of platforms. So you could be recording how those things are changing. Are people getting what you're trying to get across, where you're making kind of a joke? Are people engaging with laughter, or are they kind of engaging with a confused emoji? It feels a bit awkward at first, but it is really important to kind of understand what you're positioning, how you viewed something, how it's then getting a reaction from people when you post it. And then keep an eye out, as any good brand should be doing, keep an eye out for anybody mentioning your brand on these different channels, and see what they're talking about, see what you could be engaging with, see what you could be taking advantage of, and see what you could be countering where relevant. And if you see people doing that, don't be afraid to direct message them the answers to the questions that they've got. If people have got a complaint, maybe kind of take that up directly with them, rather than kind of engaging in a back and forth across social media. I think it's really important to we often talk about internally about kind of trying different things, and I think it's important not to suddenly stop that because you've been doing it for a year or 18 months or 2 years. It's really important to keep that up. So if you've got the ability to do things like A/B testing on a platform, do it. Optimize your landing pages regularly. Monitor that performance. We do it. Most days will be going into each individual campaign, because things change. It's important to see why they're changing, how they're changing. Otherwise, you will reach kind of the ceiling and you'll struggle to kind of improve conversions from there. You don't want to have a really good year and then a really bad year and then a really good year. And the way to do that is to be sadly very strict with yourself in terms of tracking the outcome, the engagement, the impressions, the views, and so on and so forth, and how they differ for social media platforms, and how that kind of impacts on the results that you get, and therefore the return on investment that you're receiving. So exactly half an hour. As I said at the beginning, I wanted to leave a bit of time at the end to answer any questions. Does anybody have any questions for me about social media at all? I'm just going to go back to this slide so that people can read it. Was there anything that perhaps surprised anybody on the call today that you hadn't really thought about or you didn't think other people were doing? Perfect. Well, if anybody leaves this call and thinks of a question, feel free to message me. I think things like, thank you, Harriet, for mentioning TikTok. I think things like TikTok, they wouldn't be my recommendation as a first platform. I think you can use platforms that are more tried and tested to see what works, what doesn't work. And then you can move to TikTok with a more informed view of your target audience. But it is well worth considering, and it is well worth considering before you do anything else because you've then got it in the back of your mind. Perfect. If anybody has any questions afterwards, as I say, feel free to contact me. But do also have a look at our resources on our website, and do also feel free to register for our next masterclasses. We've got some coming up in both December and January. But thank you all very much.